They decided, nope, there's too much information, you need all of it.
We've got 8 minutes.
I guess you need to have this little separate monitor. Six.
In our video wall belt. And then you will be able to see the video wall collapse.
Yeah, when I visited that mega church, they had a room in the basement for all the AV people. And they had a wall, this entire wall in that room was one giant monitor that could be divided any way you wanted. And one was showing, what overseeing, all the others were showing different angles within the church. All the cameras in one, so over here. And then all the security cameras were on the screens too, so you can see what was going on in the social hall, what was going on in various places.
Good morning.
Morning. Oh yeah. They must have 11 full-time employees, not volunteers. They were producing original content during the week. They were creating and slowly incorporated into that Sunday's service. Social media,
It's not actually recording. We can stop the.
oh yeah, just hold on here. Hold it. Down the same stuff. Okay, thank you.
I can actually read that there the entire service because I can see what I've got going here.
Show the chat.
Hello. Good morning.
No one's watching. Yeah, I can see what you're doing right here too, so. Okay.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. Sometimes you have fun mornings when the copier breaks and we just figure it out. Everything's fine. We have all the copies we need. It makes the morning more exciting. Your heart's racing a little bit. It's good. It's good for the soul. Our first two hymns this morning are we're going to have Finlandia, the beautiful tune written by Sibelius, weaving through our whole service this morning. So we're going to sing the first verse, number 318, We Would Be One, and then Answering the Call of Love. Please rise in body or in spirit. The quartet's going to come on up to the mics and lead us.
Our hymn of love.
glad you are here. We answer the call of love together. It's the best place to be on a Sunday morning in Atlanta.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, a beloved community that changes lives. My name is Karen Martin. I'm so glad you're here. Wherever you are from and whomever you love, you are welcome here. If this is your first time, or if you've not yet had a chance, please stop by our Welcome Center right over there near the quiet room after the service to allow us to get to know you a little bit better. You can sign up to receive information about services and programs being presented over the next several weeks. Today is the first Sunday of the month. Our children and youth are beginning in worship with us. After the chalice is lit, they will go to their religious education classes in the social hall. For more information, please check your order of service. You can also talk with one of the hosts at the RE table in the social hall. After the second service at 12:30 p.m., we offer religious education classes for adults. And once again, take a look at your order of service for more information. I especially want to highlight our Inquirers class, which is great for people wanting to learn more about this faith community. It meets in room 1, right off the social hall. Also at 12:30 p.m. today is a UU parenting class taught by Associate Minister Terrence Strauss, entitled Talking with Kids About Gun Violence. This important class will meet in the social hall. Today is the last day to sign up for purchasing tickets to the Atlanta Gladiators hockey game on March 24th. It's a UUCA field trip and something fun to experience together. Sign up on the poster in the social hall or contact Jack Pierce. And then on March 31st, starting at 12:30 p.m., is an event closer to home. It's a communications summit led by our communications director, Nicole Presley. Come if you're trying to promote a new group at UUCA. Come if you want to know more about changes to the weekly update or the UUCA calendar. Come for the snacks. But stay for the tutorials, interactive activities, and presentations that will shape how UUCA does communications. Finally, March at UUCA is the month of love. UUCA callers will be phoning every household we know just to say thank you for being part of UUCA. We love you. We'll ask you if there's ways of getting involved at UUCA that you'd like to know more about. And we'll also ask you for feedback about how things are going for you at UUCA. That's all. So when you receive one of these calls, please pick up the phone. There's no one trying to sell you anything. We care about our beloved community, and the month of love is one of the many ways that we demonstrate our love. And now please be sure to take this moment to put your cell phones in their most reverent position. Once again, we're glad you're here on this beautiful morning.
As surely as we belong to the universe, we belong together. We join here to transcend the isolated self, to reconnect, to know ourselves, to be at home, here on earth, under the stars, linked with each other.
above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there are no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one.
Our story this morning, written by the Reverend Chris Bice. It's called God's Hat. I want to make sure all those who are especially young, not just young at heart, can see me. Once upon a time, there was a village with a road that went straight down the center of town. Kind of like this, if that pillar wasn't there. One day, something strange happened in this village. One day, God walked down a road in the village, and she was beautiful. She wore a long, flowing robe, and on top of her head, there was a wonderful hat. All the people stopped to stare at God as God walked by, and they kept staring until she disappeared off into the distance. Boy, God sure was beautiful, said one man. And what a beautiful blue hat she had on. Yes, God was beautiful, said a woman from the other side of the street, but it wasn't a blue hat she was wearing. No, that was a red hat. No, you are wrong, said the man. It was definitely a blue hat. No, you are wrong, said the woman. It was definitely a red hat. As the two argued, well, others joined in the dispute. Soon, the entire village was arguing. All the people on one side of the road were certain that God was wearing a blue hat, while all the other people on the other side of the road were certain that God was wearing a red hat. So you are the red hat people. Do you understand? People got mad and they started screaming at each other. For example, they were screaming, "Blue hat, blue hat, blue hat." And then the others started screaming, "Oh, you're not angry enough." Blue hat, blue to them. Let me hear ya. Finally, the people got so angry, they decided to build a wall that went straight down the center of town. From that point on, the people on one side of the wall were enemies with the people who lived on the other side of the wall, and they never spoke to each other. On one side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a god that wore a blue hat. And on the other side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a god who wore a red hat. Yeah. Well, many, many years passed, and these people were still enemies. And then one day, something miraculous happened again. God came back to this village. She was smiling, and she was balancing on top of the wall through the center of these two villages. And this time she was wearing no hat at all. All the people ran to the wall and they cried, "God, you must settle an argument for us." "Yes," said one man. "The people on that side of the street said that when you walked through the village many years ago, you were wearing a blue hat. But we know better. We know you were wearing a red hat. So tell us, God, what color was your hat?" God looked puzzled for a moment and began to scratch her head and thought, "I think I remember walking through this village many years ago," said God. "And on that day, I believe I was wearing my hat that was blue on one side and on the other side it was red." God said nothing more. She just continued walking over the wall until she disappeared off into the distance. It was very quiet for a moment. Suddenly, there was the sound of one child laughing. You want to be the child laughing? No? Okay. All right, Diane will do it. And then another child started laughing, and soon the whole village was roaring with laughter. Everyone was laughing because they realized how foolish they had been for so many years. And as the sound of the laughter grew louder and louder, the wall, it began to crumble. It began to shake until finally it came tumbling down to the ground. For many, many years after that day, the people told the story of God's hat and how laughter had torn down a wall between a foolish and divided people. And that is our story this morning.
And this chalice symbolizes the healing of divisions. It symbolizes peace, and to honor the coming together of the blue hats and the red hats, I invite a person from this side and a person from this side to come join me up here to light our chalice this morning. Please do so. Great, Sven. Wonderful. Come on up. Great. Great. Jackie, why don't you go ahead? And let's say the words of our chalice lighting. They're on your screen and in your order of service. May the light of this flame illuminate our tradition of seeking, invite all who yearn for acceptance, and ignite our passion for justice and for peace. Wonderful. And now we're going to join each other in sharing a handshake or a hug, and I want to remind our children to go off to their RE classes at this time. Let's share the warmth of this community.
Yuval, Einstein regarded nationalism as a disease. With increasing populism and protectionism, do you think we are headed towards an era that mimics World War II? And let's layer on top of that what could happen with technology as well.
Well, first, I don't think that nationalism is a disease. Nationalism also has a very good side. Nationalism has been one of the most beneficial ideas in history because it makes strangers care about one another and cooperate to a certain extent. A nation is a community of millions of strangers. And nationalism enables these millions of strangers to cooperate. And this is very good. The problem is what happens when the nations begin to collide with one another, especially in an age like today, when to solve the major problems of the world, you need global cooperation and not just national cooperation. And if we are in this situation, if your highest loyalty is to the nation, the result is likely to be trade war and real war, like the Second World War, and under current condition, this probably means the destruction of human civilization.
Oh, gosh.
I think we don't need to abolish nationalism. There is a place, an important place for national sentiments in the world. What we need is to add to the national loyalty another level of loyalty to humankind and to the world. And people can have several loyalties at the same time. Okay. You can be loyal to your family, to your neighborhood, to your business, to your profession, and to your nation at the same time. And you have to decide. Now, in this dilemma, I prefer my family over my business. Here, I prefer my business over my family. And here, I prefer my nation over my business.
So contextual.
Similarly,
okay.
You need to add another layer of loyalty also to humankind. And sometimes, you will have to prefer the interests of humankind over the interests of your nation.
let us put hands on hearts, feel the warm connection there. Let love in this moment flow. Say to yourself silently, I will love myself. I will love others. And that love will heal the world. And now the joys and sorrows of our beloved community. Carol Ann Arvin's mama, Christy Kinsall, fell and broke her right, previously unbroken hip. Now she has matching replacements. She is back at Canterbury Court for another round of rehab. Cards and emails are appreciated. We widen our concern beyond the walls of this sanctuary to bring awareness to the United Methodist Church. This week we saw the second largest body of Christians in America struggle with the LGBTQ people in its midst. On Tuesday, the vote by church officials and lay members from around the world was to double down on current church policy, which states that the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. The vote served as a rejection of a push by progressive members and leaders to open the church to LGBTQ people. As my colleague, the Reverend Jake Morrill, says, I don't pretend to understand the complexity and nuance of the process in motion. So all I can say is my heart goes out to those whose beloved institution is at stake. LGBT folks are hurting. And I'll say this, he says, to those of you who need to hear it, no denomination, not mine or any other, is God. And no denominational action can add to or subtract from the perfect love God has for you, exactly as you wonderfully are, because of who and how you are, and not in spite of it. Thank you for however you use or will use your gifts for ministry, whether lay or ordained. Of course, spoiler alert, whatever particular news any day brings, love wins in the end. It's just that sometimes it takes a little while. And so it is. At this time, I invite you to say out loud the names of people you are holding in your heart this morning. Let silence be our sanctuary now. We take in a big breath. Then we exhale. We gently surrender to something larger than ourselves. We enter into the wise silence.
March is Teacher Recruitment Month. I'd like to invite Liebman up here to share some of her thoughts about teaching at UUCA.
Good morning, everybody. When I signed up to teach RE here at UCA last March, I was terrified. I had only been a member of UUCA for about a month and only been identifying as UU for that same amount of time. How was I supposed to teach anybody about Unitarian Universalism? Then I was reminded that we're a faith that values the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. No one was going to expect me to have all of the right answers, and most of the time there's not really a right answer. And that got me through the first lesson. Since then, I've been able to take a journey with my fellow teachers and with the kids in my class as we search for that truth and meaning in our lives. I have found that traveling with this group of kids has helped me find that own truth for myself and has helped me take that shared connection and use that to articulate the meaning in my life. I don't feel like I'm teaching kids. I feel like I'm on a journey with friends. So I'd like to encourage all of you to join us on this journey and join the RE team when it comes time to sign up at the end of March.
Thank you, Liebs. At the end of the month, we will have a teacher recruitment fair in the social hall after both services, where you can sign up to teach RE next year. Please take a few weeks to consider how teaching in the religious education program can enrich your life like it has Liebs. Now, this Sunday's offering will be given and gratefully received. Please give generously.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, they watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful
really liked what Liebs had to say about going on a journey with friends. And I want to thank you for your generosity this morning, because your financial generosity makes those kinds of journeys possible. That's just what we do at UUCA, and your gifts make that happen. And who knows where that journey is going to lead you. I know for myself, I was an adult RE teacher. I was a part of the music program at my church a million years ago. I was on the fundraising committee. I was the board president. And that journey just, well, it brought me here. And I'm not saying it's going to bring you here, but who knows where it'll bring you? Who knows where it'll take you? And once again, thank you for your gifts, because you make that possible. You make surprises possible in people's lives. Thank you.
Now please join me for the dedication of the offertory with the words printed in your order of service. To the work of this congregation, which is a tapestry of love and action we call community, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings.
It's the African tribe of Yoruba that likes to tell this ancient story about its trickster god, Ishu. One day, Ishu began a journey wearing a hat, red on one side, white on the other. Making not a sound, he walked between two friends, one seeing the white side of the hat, the other seeing the red. Later that day, the two friends spoke to one another about the mysterious man in the hat, and immediately they began to argue about the color of that hat. White, red. The quarreling turned to blows as each man professed to know the right answer and demanded to be acknowledged as the victor in the discussion. The trickster god Ishu chuckled at that sight and walked over to the men, now bloodied and angry because of their argument. And he showed them his hat, red on one side, white on the other. He was delighted by the fact that they would fight about something so ridiculous as the color of another man's hat, ruining their long-standing friendship in the process. Taking pleasure in testing the strengths and weaknesses of mankind, Ishu provides the lesson of making the right choices in life. Ishu can see in all directions, watches what people do, good and bad. His punishment is swift, but also kind. Ishu is found at the crossroads. That is the ancient story. And if I were to modernize it, to speak specifically to current issues of concern, well, I would change it to read as follows. One day, Ishu began a journey wearing a hat. And this hat was fully covered by a special HD TV screen that projected crystal clear images of three of the most pressing issues of our time: mass immigration, cultural modernization, and globalization. Making not a sound, he walked between two friends who saw images flashing on the screen-covered hat. One was of a caravan of Central American migrants approaching the United States. Another was of LGBTQ United Methodist pastors and empowered women like U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And a third was of factories in the U.S. closing down and reopening in China. Images like that beaming off of Ishu's hat. The two friends spoke to each other about what they saw, and immediately the arguments began. One friend, who could be called a right-wing populist or an authoritarian nationalist, was deeply offended. For him, there could be no loyalty beyond that of the law and the will of his nation, which was embodied in the land's great leader. And here's what that great leader said: that immigrants were an infestation upon the land, and national racial purity needed to be upheld. Historically marginalized identities pursuing their rights needed to stop being so uppity and get back to where it used to be. And cooperation with other nations is weakness, while strength is going it alone. That is what the great leader said. All of which made the other friends shout out in fury and frustration. What your great leader is saying is so wrong. What you take to be the worst of evils is not so, but cause for rejoicing. For this friend, upon seeing images of migrants, understood the traumas that would lead families to undertake the dangerous journey to a new land and into a new life, and affirmed their right to pursue happiness and to pursue wholeness. Furthermore, he knew that multiculturalism was the strength of a people and not a weakness. As for the images of LGBTQ United Methodist pastors and empowered women like U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, he found himself inspired by their persistence and courage. Since he was a straight white male, he searched himself for ways he might use his privilege to further support all historically marginalized communities in their growth towards equality and justice. And as for that image of factories closing down in the US and being replanted in China, that image of globalization and one of its impacts, of course, he rued the local consequences of the loss of jobs and was led to wonder about whether global trade could be better regulated. But when he flashed upon another dimension of globalization, which has to do with problems that do not obey national borders, problems that require solutions which are international in scope, problems like climate change, problems like mass migration, let us call this second friend a cosmopolitan, as opposed to a right-wing populist / authoritarian nationalist. As a cosmopolitan, he embraces loyalty to his country, but also feels loyalty to the entire world, to humankind. He knows, furthermore, that the laws of a land may be out of sync with what is good and what is right. And whenever any great leader passes a law that violates human rights, that law is to be resisted. This is how the two friends differed, why they responded as they did to Ishu's hat, and why it led them to fighting. The trickster Ishu chuckled at the sight of these two friends fighting and walked over to them. He took off his hat, he reached inside it, and he pulled out an article from The Atlantic. Just stay with me here. He pulled out an article from The Atlantic on the topic of behavioral immune system. The two friends looked confusedly at Ishu, wondering what on earth that had to do with anything. Like maybe you're looking at me right now. Ishu said, "Just listen and learn." Quoting the article's author, Kathleen McAuliffe, he said, "As we move about in our world, a sizable volume of research shows our minds are constantly searching our surroundings for contaminants, moldy leftovers, garbage spilling out of trash cans, a leaky sewage pipe. And when the brain detects them, it triggers sudden feelings of revulsion. Confronted, we withdraw from the threat. The mechanism is a part of what is known as the behavioral immune system, and it is as vital for our survival as the fight or flight response." Ishu went on to develop this line of thought, that for purposes of safety and survival, evolution gives people a germ radar that is constantly scanning the environment for bad stuff. And the resulting feeling of disgust is a message saying it's a threat, stay away, danger, it could hurt you. But the main thing he wanted the two friends to see is how all of this lines up with political affiliation, with one of them being a conservative right-wing populist type and the other being a liberal cosmopolitan type. To this end, Ishu mentioned two things. One was how science showed that conservatives tend to have higher levels of sensitivity to disgust. They have higher levels of sensitivity than liberals. Neuroscientist Reed Montague once hooked up 83 subjects up to an MRI to scan their brains as they looked at a variety of subjects. It turned out that the brains of liberals and conservatives reacted similarly to violent images and to pleasant images. But when pictures of repulsive things were shown, the reaction of conservative brains was off the charts, while the reaction of liberal brains was much milder. Dr. Montague was able to predict with 95% accuracy whether the person whose brain he was scanning was politically liberal or conservative. Yes. That's the universe saying, amen. I'm going to just take it, whatever you give me. The second thing Ishu mentioned was that the behavioral immune system tends to go overboard. He quoted Kathleen McAuliffe again on how our behavioral immune system is error-prone in flagging danger. It produces a lot of false positives. Any physical oddity displayed by the people around us, contagious or not, can set off the alarm, just as a pink eye or a hacking cough or an open wound may activate our behavioral immune system, so too can a birthmark, obesity, deformity, disability, or even liver spots. Furthermore, having germs on our mind can affect how we feel about people we perceive to be different from us, a different race or ethnicity. In other words, said Ishu to the two friends, your behavioral immune systems like to exaggerate so that what is merely odd or different can trigger full-blown disgust. And this propensity to exaggerate only increases in proportion to how sensitive a person might be. And that is when the liberal friend triumphantly cried out, aha! Turning to his conservative friend, he cried out, well, no wonder you got so upset at that Super Bowl ad from back in 2014, which featured immigrants singing different stanzas of America the Beautiful in their native tongue. I remember how that grossed you out. You got so grossed out by that you insisted that that song should be sung only in English. No wonder you're feeling so threatened by gains in real equality for LGBTQ people, for people of color, for the disabled, for the poor, and for other historically marginalized communities. No wonder, too, that you feel so hostile and so cynical about loyalty to global well-being and cooperation with other nations to solve world problems. No wonder, said the more liberal cosmopolitan friend, as if that solved anything. At which point, the more conservative right-wing populist type shot back with, well, two can play at that game. No wonder that liberals like you could be so clueless and naive, so oblivious to the dangers that multiculturalism and justice movements for marginalized identities and globalization represents. No wonder. And for a moment, the two just glared at each other. The two friends, they just glared at each other. And then Ishu signaled them to stop. With a voice as solemn as a judge, he said, I am the trickster God, and I take pleasure in testing the strengths and the weaknesses of people like you, and both of you are found wanting." "What?" said the liberal. "What? Right is on my side. There is no middle ground between affirming human rights and denying them. There is nothing admirable or honorable on the side of a great leader who uses words for animals and rodents like infest to describe people, a word, I will add, that was often used in Rwanda during genocide, comparing people to roaches." "I agree," said the trickster God. "I agree. But where you lack is in your sense of compassion. Your conservative, right-wing populist friend is, by nature, more sensitive than you to that which disgusts. Combine that with how the behavioral immune system tends to exaggerate mere oddities and differences into full-blown threats, and what you have is someone who is peculiarly vulnerable to being manipulated by great leader bullies. Listen to me. I am the trickster God, but the great leaders of this world, the Trumps, the Putins, the Erdogans, the Orbans, the Dudens, all the right-wing populist demagogues, they outdo even me in their trickery. Just listen to a list of some of their tactics as described by writer Doug Mutter. They define foes rather than formulate policies. You following? They create unending crises and struggles, and the less factual the struggle, the easier it is to maintain. A real struggle might come to some conclusion, but an entirely made-up one will never. So, for example, the millions of illegal voters who decide American elections, they can't be stopped because they don't exist. The struggle against them will go on forever. Democrats, they can never stop trying to take your guns because they weren't even trying to take your guns in the first place. The war on Christmas will come back every year, regardless of anything the faithful might do to defend themselves. People believe these narratives because they are emotionally satisfying, not because they are factual. The point for the great leader is not to win rational argument, but to make rational argument impossible. Authoritarianism arrives, not because people say that they want it, but because they lose the ability to distinguish between facts and desires. Saying all of this, Ishu fell silent. And then he looked into the liberal cosmopolitan's friend's eyes and said, with sadness, "Your conservative right-wing friend is in a perpetual state of trauma, stoked by the great leader. And traumatized people spread the trauma. Terrorized people spread terror. In your compassion, you must get to the root of the thing, which is a constant feeling of fear and unsafety. Help your friend feel more safe, and maybe a better path can open up for you both." At this point, Ishu, the trickster god, turned to the conservative, right-wing populist friend. "As for you," he said, "your failure is in succumbing to the emotional satisfactions of the great leader's hateful performances. His outrageous conspiracy theories, all the tweets, all the drama that he generates. Science tells us that you are uniquely susceptible to fear-mongering, but both science and religion also say that you are a human being with free will, and your biology cannot compel you to commit atrocities for the so-called good of your country. You must get away from the hate-based, fear-based messages, even as they light up your nervous system and give you a kind of emotional high. Terrible though it may be, it is still a high. Give up your addiction to that before evil swallows you whole. There is a book you must read, continued Ishu, the trickster god. It is by Rabindranath Tagore, and it is called The Home and the World. In that book, the young wife, Bimala, is entranced by the dramatic right-wing rhetoric of her husband's friend, Sandeep, and she becomes an eager follower of a nationalist movement to boycott foreign goods. Bimala complains that her husband, the cosmopolitan Hindu landlord Nikhil, is not very sympathetic towards the right-wing movement. But now listen to what he has to say about it all. I am willing to serve my country, but my worship I reserve for the right and the true, which is far greater than my country. To worship my country as a god is to bring a curse upon it. And with this, Ishu picks up his hat, puts it on his head, walks away from the village, and he is gone. The friends, they look at each other in shock. They come together, and together they walk slowly and thoughtfully back towards the village. And that is the modernized version of the old Ishu story. Modernized to speak to some of the urgent particulars of our day. As in ancient times, so now, Ishu can see in all directions, watches what people do, good and bad. His punishment is swift, but also kind. It is said he is found at the crossroads, and that is exactly where we are today. Amen.
Our final hymn this morning is again Finlandia, the number 159. This is my song. Please rise in body or in spirit. The quartet will join us at the microphones.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and nigh. This
Let's join hands for the benediction. If you are a guest among us today, I am so glad you came. I hope you received some awesome soul food that feeds you. And of course, I hope that for all of us here are regular attenders. And as regular attenders, we have a special responsibility to practice open arms hospitality to people who are new among us. And last month, I introduced a rule. Do you guys remember it? The rule of 3. That's right. It is essentially about not talking to other regulars, for 3 minutes after I say, go in peace, go, right? After I do that, send you out into the world, reach out to folks you don't know or haven't talked to yet. Now, this month, I want to add on to that by suggesting 3 things you may say, which I think are particularly helpful. Number 1, thank you for being here. It's just that simple. Guests often return just because they were simply told, thank you. Number 2 is let me introduce you to blank, someone. These initial meetings, they pave the way for a journey of friendship. So you help pave the way. Third thing you can say, would you join us for lunch? There's something powerfully bonding about people sharing a meal together. It takes 3 minutes for folks to exit this congregation after worship. And it is important to make sure that our guests have a real connection. They've made a real connection before they get out there in the parking lot. Of course, if you're a guest, you're like, whoa, I'm out of here. You're going to take just 1 minute, right? They're going to get me. Well, I hope you get God. I hope you get God in the best sense of the term. Let's practice the rule of 3, practice hospitality to people, knowing that we have something beautiful to offer this world, and people are hungry for it. So let us give our gift. Go in peace.
Let's go to the social. Yeah, it's going great. This popped up. I just showed that MSNBC video. As soon as I put it up there, scanning and watching. So, it's perfectly to show that. I was wondering if they might have added some kind of something. I don't want to just bypass their method and still, breaking the law.
You might be able to argue that it's a fair use.
Well, Kevin, so come,
So maybe we just roll through the system and let Michael.
And then it'll be on all of them.
Okay. He knows that. Great.
That'll be the easiest.
Let's just go easy. I was at a phone conference. I just feel like I should share it. Yeah. I heard the best part I've ever heard my whole life. Like, why are you going to say? Aeolians, Oakwood University. Yeah. Aeolian is a scale, but I don't know why they named themselves that. They sang it to everyone's mind. People could not handle how good they were. Yeah. So, loved it. The HBCU is sort of Black College University. And typically, like, those girls get on stage and sing spirituals, just knock you out of their socks. And so they sang fun. They sang a little Lithuanian piece, just like perfect in every way. And everyone's just, what is happening? It was great. Yeah. Oh, hey, I'm gonna get a little funky.
Welcome back.
How are you?
Good. You had a good practice on
I'm sure. Looking forward to this Wednesday.
go. Yes.
Just basically here and try to find seats for them. Actually, what happens is this fills up. We have to fit the door. Don't require if they don't have choir, they can empty over there. Ask them. Okay. I will sit here. Where do you want to sit? Sit here. Is there a flasher? Is there a flasher? Not the singer. All right. Cool. I'm sure this is open. Wait. You don't even have to do that. People who are supposed to be late are supposed to. Got it? basket-wise, I'm gonna work this side here.
So did they stop us? Actually, did they just raise a red flag, or did they stop the live stream?
It's hard to say. They did not stop the stream. They said the streaming simply ran. Right. The SWAT team is coming to the window as we speak. Your stream temporarily blocked. So
I know that this YouTube's streaming thing they do one strike and you're out.
The streaming is one strike.
Yes. And so I listened to podcasts from 20 Podcast Network, and they do live streams, and they were doing commentary on the Apple accounts and their stream up. Right? So they had no live streaming, and they challenged.
And we all evolved.
First was their news organization, and they do Mystery Science Theater 2000 is what they call it. So they have people there in the room and a TV behind them in the stream. They're sitting there sort of watching a stream, and starting to press the camera, turning back to moving and continuing to make it. And they challenged it, so YouTube was a further challenge to answer. They have 3 weeks to decide what they're going to do. They can withdraw the challenge, they can sue, or they can just but it sounds like this one was not automatically generated. This one was, they actually got a letter from a law firm. And so they could not stream anything at all on YouTube until either Apple withdrew the complaint or until the 3-week timer expired, and they withdrew it by default. And of course, this law firm let the timer expire instead of saying, oh, you were right. They just said nothing.
Sent us cease and desist. And then when challenged, nice one to have it of communicating. He said that he wants to straight out. It's fine. So I can just pause the screen, look it over, type in the message, record it just a second. Sorry.
Actually, you can even pull up this post the link to the video that we're holding this video.
Yes. Wouldn't be like some of us if we just use our audience better than we like after they just started it, they keep watching it, and by the time there's time to start service, they can start from something else going on the side, and they would be off in YouTube or somewhere. I don't know. But no, it's a good idea. So that would require a little.
You don't think we could just focus on
I don't think that addresses the legal question of whether or not we have to
It
wait.
also doesn't address the technical question because I believe they identify it easily based on the audio. There's a lot less.
Yeah, yeah.
I read about this because
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. I like when there's a lot of excitement going on at the door. Everyone's just, they're pouring in. It's great. It's great. Good to see everyone. This morning, we're going to have a favorite hymn of the congregation. We Would Be One. This Finlandia tune will be woven through the whole service. So we're going to open by singing the first verse of We Would Be One, and then the song Answering the Call of Love. Please rise in body or in spirit. The quartet's going to come up and sing beautiful parts to everything, like they do. You are here. It's the best place to be in Atlanta, Georgia on a Sunday morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta.
It's a long name.
It is. I haven't been here long enough. A beloved community that changes lives. I'm Karen Martin, and I'm so glad you're here this morning. Wherever you're from and whomever you love, you are welcome here. If this is your first time or if you've not yet had a chance, please stop by our Welcome Center right over there by the quiet room after the service to allow us to get to know you a little bit better. You can sign up to receive information about services and programs being presented over the next several weeks. Today is the first Sunday of the month. Our children and youth are beginning in worship with us. After the chalice is lit, they will go to their religious education classes in the social hall. For more information, please check your order of service. You can also talk to one of the hosts at the RE table in the social hall. After the second service at 12:30 p.m., we offer religious education classes for adults. And once again, take a look at your order of service for more information. I especially want to highlight our Inquirers class, which is great for people wanting to learn more about this faith community. It meets in room 1, right off the social hall. Also at 12:30 p.m. today is a UU parenting class taught by Associate Minister Taryn Strauss. It is entitled Talking with Kids About Gun Violence. This important class will meet in the social hall. Today is the last day to sign up for purchasing tickets to the Atlanta Gladiators hockey game on March 24th. It is a UUCA field trip, something fun to experience together. Sign up on the poster in the social hall or contact Jack Pierce. There's Jack waving. And then on March 31st, starting at 12:30 p.m., is an event closer to home. It's a communications summit led by our communications director, Nicole Presley. Come if you're trying to promote a new group at UUCA. Come if you want to know more about changes to the weekly update or the UUCA calendar. Come for snacks. But stay for the tutorials, interactive activities, and presentations that will shape how UUCA does communications. Finally, March at UUCA is the month of love. UUCA callers will be phoning every household we know just to say, thank you for being part of UUCA. We love you. We'll ask you if there are ways of getting involved at UUCA that you'd like to know more about, and we'll ask you for feedback about how things are going for you at UUCA. That's all. So when you receive one of these calls, please pick up the phone. No one's trying to sell you anything. We care about our beloved community, and the month of love is just one of the many ways that we demonstrate our love. And now please be sure to take this moment to put your cell phone in its most reverent position. Thank you. Once again, we're very glad you're here on this beautiful morning.
As surely as we belong to the universe, we belong together. We join here to transcend the isolated self, to reconnect, to know ourselves, to be at home, here on earth, under the stars, linked with each other.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one.
Our story this morning comes from Reverend Chris Bice. It's called God's Hat. Once upon a time, there was a village with a road that went straight through the center of town. One day, something strange happened in this town. God walked down the road, and she was beautiful. She wore a long flowing robe, and on top of her head was a wonderful hat. All the people in the town stopped what they were doing, stopped to stare at God as she walked by, and they kept staring until she disappeared in the distance. Wow, God sure was beautiful, said one man. And what a beautiful blue hat she had on. Yes, God was beautiful, said a woman from the other side of the street, but it wasn't a blue hat she was wearing. That hat was a red hat. No, you are wrong, said the man. It was definitely a blue hat. No. You are wrong, said the woman. It was definitely a red hat. As the two argued, others joined in the dispute. Soon, the entire village was arguing. All the people on one side of the road were certain, all the people over here on this side of the road were certain that God was wearing a blue hat. And all the people on this side of the road, they were very sure that God was wearing a red hat. People got mad and they started screaming at each other. They started screaming, "Blue hat, blue hat." And then the rest, people on the other side of the road were screaming, "Red." And they were so angry at those people. Let's scream. Finally, the people got so angry that they decided to build a wall straight through the center of town, right where God had walked down the road. From that point on, the people on one side of the wall were enemies with the people who lived on the other side of the wall. And they never spoke to each other. On one side of the wall, people built a church where they worshiped a God that wore a blue hat. And on this side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a God that wore a red hat. Many, many years passed, and the people remained enemies. And then, one day, another miracle visited this town. God came back, walking back through the village. She was smiling and balancing on top of the wall that went through the center of town of the two villages. This time, she was wearing no hat at all. All the people ran to the wall and looked up at her and they cried, "You must settle our argument." "Yes," said one man, "the people on that side of the street say that when you walked through the village many years ago, you were wearing a blue hat." Crazy, right? But we know you were wearing a red hat. We know better. So tell us, God, what color was your hat that day? Well, God looked puzzled for a moment. She thought and scratched her head. I think I remember walking through this village many years ago. And when I did on that day, I believe I was wearing my hat that was, well, it was blue on one side and it was red on the other. And saying nothing more, God continued walking down the wall until she disappeared off into the distance. It was very quiet for a moment. Suddenly, there was the sound of one child laughing. And then another child started laughing. And then another. And another, and soon, well, the whole village started laughing. And everybody was laughing because they realized how foolish they had been all these years. And as the sound of the laughter grew louder and louder, their foolishness, well, the wall began to shake, and the stones began to crumble. And that laughter just shook those stones until the wall, it just came tumbling down. And for many, many years that day, the people of this one single village told the story of God's hat and how laughter had torn down a wall between a divided and foolish people. And that is our story this morning.
Our chalice is symbolic of our desire to heal all divisions, for people to come together. And just to really punctuate that fact, I want to invite someone from the blue side and someone from the red side to come forward and light our chalice this morning. Come on, somebody. Come on, somebody. Come on. One person. There you go. There we go. There's a blue. Okay. Come on, red. Someone from the red side. There we go. Right there. Barbara. Well, great. You got the color right there. Let's light our chalice this morning. And as they're doing that, let's say our chalice lighting words, which are available on the screen and in your order of service. May the light of this flame illuminate our tradition of seeking, invite all who yearn for acceptance, and ignite our passion for justice and for peace. And now let's greet each other with a handshake or a hug. If you are a youth, we have youth act.